Welcome back to another episode of The Hit. My name is James Layton, CEO and founder of Anderson James. This is the podcast where every single week I bring you a leader from our sector to discuss some of the biggest challenges in UK housing today. Today I was delighted to be joined by David Dunn, Chief Executive Officer at RHP. We spoke at length around 30 years in the housing sector for David and how he's taken RHP to being an award-winning housing association over the last 23 years. We also talk about another one of David's passions and how he thinks innovation and technology are going to be key to the future of the housing sector. David, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, James. Lovely to be here.
As I always like to start, as you probably know, do you mind just giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself, you know, the current view and landscape, etc.?
Yeah. Well, I thought about sort of, running you through my CV and stuff like that, but I thought that might be too boring, actually, because I guess all I want to say to you is that I, as CEO of RHP, which is what I do, I think I've got the best job in the world because it's a total joy and a privilege. And I can honestly say that I've enjoyed practically every minute of it, which of course makes it even harder for me to leave it because I'm going to be stepping down at the end of March. I think it's the reason I love it so much is because it's just so well suited to me because, without being too pretentious about things, I describe myself as a bit of a natural explorer. I'm totally restless and constantly thinking about, how I can make things better or do things in different ways or solve problems, both big and small. So although, I've been in housing for absolutely ages, I think it's almost 38 years now, actually, I still sort of think of myself as being a bit of an outsider, which I think has really helped me sort of keep on sort of challenging the status quo and try new things out. And I guess just to finish, these sort of qualities I sort of take into my life generally, really, because I've got a real passion for sort of traveling and adventure. I've been very fortunate to have climbed some of the biggest mountains in the world. So places like Elbrus in Russia, Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya in Africa, Cotopaxi in Ecuador.
Yeah.
So I guess that all fits together for me in terms of that adventurous spirit, and RHP gives me so many opportunities to do more of that really.
Yeah, and it's quite relevant actually, because there's one of the things that I wanted to start on is just like your career journey from Richmond. But the most interesting thing is I've seen more traditional careers, joined an organisation already established, etc., etc. But Richmond was obviously formed, and you were very, very much involved in that. So, talk me through how that even comes about, how it works, because that'd be very uncommon these days, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a story about being in the right place at the right time, James,
Right.
Because in effect, we established RHP, or I established RHP back in the year 2000, and that was through what's described as a large-scale voluntary transfer from Richmond Council, which basically means that with the support of residents, you have the ability to set up a brand new organisation and go and raise private finance to basically buy the council's housing off them.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. But anybody that's gone through a stock transfer will know that it's not easy or quick. And it requires a huge amount of work and commitment from lots of people to win the support and trust of residents, basically to set up a brand new organisation to become their landlord. I can still remember the moment I received the fax from the Electoral Reform Society telling us we'd got the votes of enough tenants and leaseholders to go ahead and set up RHP. And since then, it's been, for me personally, it's been a life-changing experience because I really did get the golden ticket, because not only did I become a chief executive, which is, as I say, a total privilege, but it gave me the chance to start afresh, to have a brand new organization with pretty much a blank piece of paper. And at the time, there were lots of things we just didn't know. But what we did know was that we weren't going to waste the opportunity. We wanted to be absolutely brilliant at something. And we chose two things. First of all, being absolutely brilliant at customer service, and secondly, being an excellent employer. And I think the key thing we realized was that you don't get one without the other. You know, if you want to do amazing stuff, you've got to find a wonderful place to work. Yeah. I think becoming brilliant at these two areas has given us real focus and has guided us ever since. And in many ways, has been the secret to our success, I'd say, really.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And I think some of the best organisations, there's definitely a correlation. Some of the best organisations in the sector I know have the best employer stats as well. So they have the best customer satisfaction, but they also have the best employer satisfaction. And like, we'll probably segue around a little bit here, but just give us the current view of RHP today. So just give us the helicopter view, size, properties, employees, etc. And then we'll probably go back and explore some of the other stuff.
Yeah, well, RHP is a medium-sized housing association group. It basically works in West London. As a group, we own or manage about 10,000 homes.
Yeah.
So about 8,000 of those homes are tenanted, and about 2,000 are leaseholders. People who bought their flats. We're still living in blocks of flats that we manage. The group consists of RHP as the parent, and a small organisation called Carl Homes, which is a subsidiary, and they provide specialist management and support services to housing cooperatives. We employ about 250 people, give or take. That number hasn't really changed very much over the years. Our turnover is about sort of £60 million a year.
And if we go back to the beginning, what were some of the fundamental things you thought about? You said good customer service, you said good employee and make a great business for people to work in. But what were some of the key fundamental things that you thought about back then around the organisation you wanted to create? Plus, how's that developed and changed in 20 odd years? I mean, because it will have changed, obviously.
Oh, it's a great question, Jen. I could be here all day talking about this topics, but I won't be. But fundamentally, RHP is all about transformational change, really, because we started off back in 2000, coming out of a local authority housing department, and we didn't really have very much going for us, and we weren't very good at anything, to be quite honest. And that wasn't the fault of the people who worked there. It was just because we had no money to spend on anything. Yeah. And we didn't really have any sort of leadership ethos or culture around anything that mattered to us, really. So we spent really the first 5 years of RHP just getting the basics sorted out, quite simply answering the phone and getting back to people quickly. And secondly, doing all the promises that we'd made to residents during the stock transfer. So, in essence, we promised to bring all of their homes up to good modern standards within 5 years. And that involved doing thousands of kitchens and bathrooms and central heating systems and goodness knows what. So we were pretty busy for 5 years. The next 5 years was the really exciting bit, because we then started to get into the cultural change side of things, really, because as I said right at the start, we didn't just want to be, just sort of run of the mill at something. We wanted to be absolutely brilliant at service. And we knew to be brilliant at service, you had to create a certain type of culture in the organisation. And that meant, as we were talking about just now, recruiting the right people, bringing the right people into the organisation with the right attitudes. So we went out, basically, and we just found people who loved service, who just got it, who wanted to be better than we were, really. So we went out to shops, cafes, building societies, banks, airlines, goodness knows where, to find people who really, really wanted to change the world around service. And that's made a massive difference. We then sort of entered into what I describe as the mad scientist phase. Because we thought, okay, we've got into this service stuff, really. What do we do next, really? And we started to really sort of free up the organisation around innovation and creativity. And we went a bit bonkers, to be honest, because we were just trying to think about, all the things we could do to sort of change the world in housing. And alongside that, to create, the sort of culture, the sort of fun and vibrant place to work where people could do their very best work for us and do the right thing for customers. And during that time, we launched the first fully digital housing service, We Think in Housing, which has really sort of sets the sort of tone for the rest of the organisation. We've moved out of that sort of mad scientist phase because we're now into a new phase, which is really about much more focused innovation. And we're still having loads of fun, but we're trying to really focus upon stuff that matters most to our customers and makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I listened to your story and straight away I think, wow, in slightly different terms, but we are back to 2000 in some ways. Like, how do we increase and improve the customer is still pivotal in the process, and I think we're still looking at ways of innovating, still looking at creativity, but all organizations are now still looking at that customer first approach. But what have you seen in the skill sets change over those 20 years or so in terms of the type of people you need now versus the type of people you needed then? What's changed in the dynamic of an individual you need to recruit?
Yeah, well, it's I guess it's a couple of things really. On one level, it hasn't changed at all because for me, it's all about attitude. I've always felt that you can't sort of teach people to have the right attitude around service. You either care about it, or you don't really. What you can do is you can give people the skills and the tools, and you can help people to get better and to improve. But fundamentally, you've got to believe it matters, haven't you? Really, if you don't think it matters, then you're going to struggle. Yeah. And to quite honest, James, I mean, I'm sure you recognise this. You can walk into a cafe or bar, or restaurant, or whatever. There are certain people who sort of light up the room, aren't they, when they're serving you or talking to you, whatever. And they're the sort of people. That's the sort of magic service ingredient that we're looking for. I think, secondly, we're looking for those slightly maverick people. Those people who basically are constantly saying, well, how can we do better? We can do better than that. So what? Irish people win all these awards and stuff, but we can actually do better than that. People are always trying to think about, well, how can we make things better for our customers? The third thing which has changed around skills, really, and it's an obvious one, really, but it's the whole thing around technology and digital, really. Because if you want to be brilliant at service these days, you've got to be able to work across a whole variety of different, mediums and use different technologies and relate to people in different ways, really. So that are the sort of key things I'd say about that, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned technology. I was going to talk about it later on, but I think it's an important time now. Is just what has changed for you in the sector? So kind of like if we look at innovation and change and technology, you mentioned that you got the thing from the tenants to say it was a fax. I mean, that's one fundamental change that's happened, right? No more fax machines. But what are some of the other things that you've seen in terms of innovation and technology that have improved our sector in that time?
Well, I think it's really interesting because for a long time, I think housing hasn't changed very much actually around use of technology in particular. But things are changing, and there's a lot of people out there doing some really fantastic work using new technology now in housing. And in my opinion, that is the biggest, most important change we can make in our industry, because I do think to an extent we're lagging behind other sectors, really. And the reason it's so important, and I know not everybody will agree with me, but I do feel very passionate about this, is that a lot of what we do in housing actually is transactional. The reason I know that, what I mean by transactional is that it's people doing sort of day-to-day stuff like paying their rent or booking a repair or changing a repair or booking a gas service or I don't know, things like that, really. And the reason I know that is because we spent about a year at RHP working out what we actually did, how we spent our time. And what we did, basically, we had sort of three sort of imaginary buckets. One bucket was basically stuff that, in essence, was transactional, administrative. We could automate it. We stuck it into one bucket. A third bucket, which basically was around stuff which requires human interaction, and there's lots of things in housing that do require human interaction. And then a sort of middle bucket of stuff we just weren't sure about, really. And what we found was that 90% of what we do is transactional and fits in the first box. And what that tells you is that you can automate and provide services and access to services through self-service systems online. And by doing that, and this is the magic thing about it, is you can actually reduce your operating costs and improve customer satisfaction. Because fundamentally, most people, not everybody, but most people that we interact with, our customers, actually just want to do day-to-day things easily and quickly and conveniently.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to phone a call center if they don't have to, basically. Not everybody, but that is true. And for me, that is an absolutely key point about our business, because a lot of the issues we have, a lot of the problems we have, a lot of the challenges we've got, and it still applies to RHP as anybody else really, are because we're involving human beings in stuff which actually is quite complex from a process point of view. And because of that, you drop the ball, you mess things up, and all that sort of stuff, really. And what you really want to do is use your human beings to be involved in the really important stuff, which does require those sorts of interactions, really. So I'm a real sort of passionate advocate for use of technology in service delivery, but also actually, which is the other big change which is taking place, really, is the use of modern technology in delivery of the homes of the future, smart homes in essence.
Yeah, it's so interesting if you think about it from the bank perspective. We used to go into the bank to check our balance, then it went onto the phones, now it's online. You couldn't think of anything worse than setting a direct debit up in a branch anymore, and I think it's intrusive actually to have to always have a human involved in a process that's transactional. That's the thing.
Honestly, I totally agree with you, James. I really do, because I think one of our objectives at RHP is, in a funny sort of way, is to allow customers just to get on with their lives, and for us not to interfere in their lives unless they need our help and support. Of course. And we'll always be there for them, basically.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think on the customer journey piece, people are getting so creative now with this, like so creative. And it's great to see. And I'm sure everyone's talking about it at the moment, but when you look at AI and some of the technologies coming through, it's going to get better and better and better. So,
honestly, I just think our world, our housing world, is full of massive challenges, but equally huge opportunities. And for me, the opportunities are all around technology, really, and how we combine technology with people, actually great people skills.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just talk me through, so the 23 years at RHP, like talk me through some of the key milestones for you in that. I know you said the mad scientist phase and there was phases of your development, but what were 2 or 3 of the key milestones for you in terms of a real change in direction, or a real where you thought, we've absolutely nailed this now. We have really nailed this.
Yeah. Well, honestly, again, it's one of those things, James, I could go on about for ages, really. But yeah, I mean, picking out a few moments is really hard, because there's been so many wonderful moments, both small and big ones, really, to be quite honest. But I thought I'd pick out a few, actually. First of all, I remember the very first award we won, and that was for our caretaking team. So we employ about 60 caretakers, guys who work on our estates.
Yeah.
And I remember they won Public Sector Team of the Year back in about 2001, 2002, something like that. And I just remember going to this sort of glitzy, sort of posh occasion at some hotel in London, and just thinking, wow, we won an award. Wow, this is amazing. It just felt like a sort of, a bit of a breakthrough moment for RHP, which is wonderful. The second one was really when we were named as the very best place to work in the UK for a medium-sized company.
Crazy, that. So good.
Yeah, honestly, it was like I almost fell off my chair, because it just felt like the realization of a dream come true. Because I remember, back before the stock transfer, talking to people about saying, one day people will love working for us. They'll absolutely want to knock our door down and come and work for RHP, because we'll be an amazing, inspirational place to work. And people looking at me as I was bonkers, which at the time, probably was true, to quite honest, really. So being recognised in that way, and then suddenly all these big companies around us going, well, who are RHP?
Yeah, of course.
Was brilliant, really. And on the back of that, we then also got recognised for being, invested in people at the platinum level, but actually being invested in people platinum employer of the year, which is just amazing, really. So again, it felt like an amazing moment for us. And the third moment, which was really important actually, from a service point of view, was when we launched this brand new digital housing service back in 2016, because it doesn't feel new now, it doesn't feel very innovative
No.
now. But back then it was actually, and I don't think many people were doing. A few people were doing sort of similar work, but I think we really stuck our necks out, and funny enough, it came out of a sort of real burning platform moment because I'm sure you remember, but back in 2016, David Cameron and George Osborne introduced 4 years worth of rent reductions in our sector.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments where you thought, oh crikey, what we're going to do. Like either we get very gloomy and down and start blaming the people for these difficulties, or we see this as an opportunity to change and get better. And I remember my finance director saying to me, because I was feeling a bit down about it for a few days, he said to me, look, come on, David, what are we going to do, basically? And I remember thinking, okay, well, we've got to reduce our costs, but at the same time, we want to deliver a better service. How are we going to do that? And it suddenly dawned on us that we had this opportunity, which is emerging around the use of digital technology, online services. And that really did sort of, energize the organization into a new phase, really. So they're the three moments I'd pick out, really.
Yeah, and they're all amazing. And I want to come back to one of them. But first, before I say that, one thing that I love about you is that already I can feel that you're quite an infectious leader in terms of like all of the achievements you picked there weren't personal, they were all about your team. Is that something that you've instilled into your leadership team at RHP? Because it seems like it's all about the employees and their journey. And I can see this adventurous side of you now coming through in your leadership style a little bit. But how have you created that kind of leadership style over the years? Because I see it a lot in our sector, but it genuinely feels like you set off on a mission to make it a great place to work and you achieved that. But must have been something to do with your leadership style that got you there.
I think so, James. I suppose what I'd say to you is that when I first became a chief exec, which is when we set RHP up, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know. I had no idea what a chief exec did or how they're supposed to behave. And in all honesty, I think I spent a good few years getting it wrong, actually. So I thought chief execs were all about, planning and finances and telling people what to do, basically, being instructional.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time, and it happened very gradually. But gradually, I met people who were brilliant leaders, real role models, people that weren't doing that, and they sort of showed me a different way of doing things, really. And I went through, in all honesty, a sort of gradual transformation. So I went from this sort of very sort of wooden sort of, I don't know, not particularly pleasant sort of person to work with, I think, to somebody who suddenly got the fact that actually, if I really did want to achieve great things at RHP, I needed to change, actually. And I think very slowly I did change, actually, and I really got it. But it was thanks to inspirational people I came across in my team, actually, in a funny sort of way. So I was employing people that actually, in many cases, were far better leaders than I was at the time. And it became infectious for me, really. And I suddenly saw it work as well. But I suddenly realized that, the answer to all these things actually is pretty simple. Employ really good people and then get 100% behind them, basically.
Yeah.
Support, encourage them, challenge them, set some audacious goals to aim for, and be on their side, actually. And I think the thing I feel proud of is that I honestly feel as I've tried to be on people's side, no matter what's happened to us over the last 23 years, really.
Yeah,
it's really paid off, really.
It has paid off, and you can see there's the real self-awareness to you. Like I ask you a question and you divert it to how your old self. But one thing that I think is very, very relevant is that you're very self-aware. And the big thing about leadership for me at the moment, especially in our sector, is creating a really compelling vision and getting everyone behind that vision. And it sounds like you did that from day one, weirdly, and it's kind of carried on forever.
Yeah, I think. Well, sorry, I know we did that, James. And to quite honest, it wasn't very sophisticated. I think one of the things I feel about it is that, if we're going to achieve great things in our sector, and there are some amazing people working in our sector, some great organisations, but you've got to really set people some big goals. We've got to be ambitious, really. And I one of the things that I don't want to be is I don't want to be sort of, I don't know, sort of bottom of the pile and mediocre, really.
Yeah,
And I'm sort of fed up of housing being talked about a sector where somehow or other we don't do good things and we don't provide good services. And some of that is true. A lot of it isn't. So a lot of it is just basically how people perceive us. And there's been good work to challenge that. But, for me, one of the things that I've always wanted at RHP is I want RHP to be recognised as one of the very best service providers in the UK, not just amongst housing associations, but right across the business world. So
yeah,
my dream, which I'm not going to achieve because I'm running out of time at RHP, is that there's something called the UK Customer Service Index, which is basically a sort of national league table of best service providers in the country. It's currently
yeah.
topped by Pets at Home, are currently number one on it, which makes me smile, really. But one day, I can see RHP topping that list. Wouldn't that be amazing for a housing association? Because at the moment, housing associations don't appear in the top 100 of that list. And actually, as a sector, we score much lower than most of the sectors on customer service or on the customer service scale, really.
Wow.
But that shouldn't be. We do amazing things for our customers, don't we? We do some amazing things.
Yeah.
But we need to sharpen up how we do it, really. And we need to become more efficient in how we interact with our customers. And we need to make it easier and more convenient for people, really.
Yeah, it's very people heavy, but I'm surprised that no one's ranked in that list because without housing associations, I mean, it'd be a difficult world for a lot of people. So it's surprising that stat, really.
It is so surprising to me, actually.
Massively.
And because we employ really good people who want to do good things. What we are struggling with, though, I think, is we're still sort of trying to do this with our hands tied behind our back a bit, really. And it goes back to my point about technology, really. We've got to use technology in a much bigger way, because the answer in many cases is to make it easier and simpler for our employees to deliver better service to our customers and for our customers to gain access to those services without all the inconvenience at the moment, really.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one thing that's a worry at the moment. And we'll come on to that because I think we're in some challenging waters at the moment as a sector. But just a final point on RHP and that build that you did. How have you maintained the culture? And I suppose what are the symptoms of that culture when things have got more complicated? The world's has had some difficult periods. We've had a pandemic. We've had Brexit. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened over the last 5 or 10 years that I can remember. And people have, some companies have taken their eye off the ball a little bit around culture and gone, we've got to fix these problems, and they've lost sight of their people a little bit. How have you made sure you've kept that consistent for 20 years?
I think, putting it very simply, we just made it very important to us, and we talk about it all the time, really. I mean, we're I guess we're culture nerds, really, in some ways. We just talk about it all the time. And I think what I'm really proud about is my team and my board really gets it. And it is so true that culture takes a sort of lifetime to build up. The right sort of culture takes a lifetime to build up, really. But it takes a moment to lose it, really. And we're a bit sort of obsessed by those moments, really. We're super careful about trying to make sure we don't do anything which is going to damage the most important thing we've got, which is basically our relationship with the people that we work with. The other thing I'd say about it, really, is that for me, it's about in a sort of world which is becoming more and more complex all the time, and I think housing really is a complex place to work.
It is.
It's about simplifying things, really, for me, keeping it super simple. So, our sort of vision around being a great service provider and being an excellent employer, although we've changed the words a bit over the years, fundamentally it's exactly what it was 22 years ago, really. Nothing's changed, really. And everybody knows that that's what we're about, really. I think the other thing I'd say is that, the other thing we constantly come back to, James, really is about getting the basics right, really. So it's funny because we've just been, talking to lots of people about our future vision and direction for the organisation. It feels like a good time just to sort of refresh all that, really.
Yeah.
And what people have said to us consistently, both employees and customers and actually other stakeholders, is just do the basics really well. So come back to that message I was talking about right at the start of RHP, whereby we had to answer the telephones quickly and get back to people. Well, that is true today. What people really want is your organization to be accessible, to be responsive, to be helpful to people, and they're all sort of values that we've instilled into the organisation, really. And I think, finally, what I say is that, in terms of culture, it's those defining moments, isn't it? It's when stuff goes wrong.
Agree.
It's what happens. What do you do as a leader? And I think, well, I feel proud of the fact that over the years, both myself and my team, we've always tried to show humility. So basically to say, honestly, stuff goes wrong every flipping day of our working lives. It does. I say to my board, if you want a perfect organization, a perfect service, this is the wrong place to be, really, because what senior management is really about, what leadership's about, really, is about constantly getting out of bed every morning and fixing problems and solving them.
Of course it is.
Finding way through it, really. And I think that by doing that, you create a really strong culture of saying, we know problems happen, we know things will be difficult for us sometimes, but it doesn't matter, we'll manage it, basically.
Yeah, and how, as a leader, because this is where I think people struggle, right? I've got 40 staff. It's very easy for me to have a temperature check on 40 staff at a regular point in time. If you've got an organisation that's 100, 200 like yourself, 500, how do you temperature check that? Because I sometimes think that leaders struggle with, you don't see what's in your own organisation. It's easier to see what's in someone else's. But how do you temperature check that culture and making sure that it is at the right level you want it to be at all times?
Yeah, well, I think it's becoming easier, to quite honest, because of the sort of the forums and technology we've got available to us, really. So we do the usual stuff around employee engagement type surveys, but actually what we now do, which I think lots of other people also do, is it's very quick pulse checks. We simply basically say to people every month or two, tell us how you're feeling, basically. And we might ask them 2 or 3 simple questions, which literally take 5 seconds to fill in.
Yeah, fun.
Online, basically. And that gives us a great clue for what's happening in the organisation. Secondly, as always, so one of the things that I do every week with members of my team is we do a live TV broadcast every week. At the moment, it's called Dome TV, once my surname, but that'll obviously change. But the key thing about that is it's interactive, so it's not just me just talking, corporate stuff. We try to actually really encourage people basically to chuck out questions at us, make comments, make remarks, and that's really nice because again you sort of pick up a sense of what's going on in the organisation. The third thing is we're sort of real fanatics around things like Yammer, in-house type media type stuff, because Yammer's brilliant because there's people just basically chatting away about stuff, really. And I think the fourth thing really is good old fashioned, basically talking to people, really. More difficult these days because of the fact we're now working, in a more flexible style. But what we do is, every month, and this is the thing we really do insist on, is every month we all go in the same building together, everybody across the whole company. Yeah, and we use that day for a mixture of fun, a bit of serious stuff. We usually have a celebration of some sort, an award ceremony, or goodness knows what. But that also really matters because then, we can just wander around and chat to people, basically, which is great, really.
Yeah, I mean, you started that by saying we do all the things that everyone else does. I don't agree. I think there's some really, really good actionable insights there around visible leadership plus letting people and giving people a platform to talk, right? That's the most important thing. And I don't think technology's facilitated that. I don't think it changes the old-fashioned nature of just a conversation, whether that be on a digital platform or otherwise, but it's giving people a voice, isn't it, and the opportunity to speak their mind without any worry that they're going to, like you're a chief executive, without worrying that like they can't ask a certain question because they might get shot down. It's that encouragement.
Yeah, the thing that I used to really hurt when I started OHP was people talking about blame culture, like a blame culture. And I say to people, honestly, that is the last thing in the world I want is any sense that people can't speak their mind and talk openly
Yeah.
And we've worked really, really hard to eradicate any sense that that somehow or other people
Yeah.
aren't allowed to talk openly and freely about stuff. Really, if you don't do that, you've got no chance in terms of creating the sort of modern culture we need these days.
No, agree. And that leads me lovely on to kind of yourself, like nearing 38 years, 35 years in the industry.
Yeah,
What?
I hadn't realised that. I actually looked at my CV the other day. It's now 38 years actually since
Wow.
I started my career in housing. So yeah, incredible, really.
Wow. And what is it at RHP? 22, 23?
Yeah, so this is our 23rd year now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're on our 23rd year.
So I want to just get into it. So for me, um, my biggest worry at the moment is like the next generation of talent coming through. Like I want the sector to be seen as an absolute, and the only reason I do this podcast is I want people to see it as a sector of choice. Well, that's my whole ambition. However, I think we need to create the leaders of the future. We need to create more Davids, and we need to be bringing more people through. What sort of actionable advice would you give to someone that's going to step into a chief exec role today that you've learned in that 30 years? Because I think the challenges are there, right? We've got the decarbonisation, new build housing crisis, we've got diversity, we've got so many topics that are difficult right now.
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
what would you advise someone if they were stepping into their first chief executive role today?
I think do what I didn't do, which was basically go and find good people to talk to. And there are fantastic role models both in the housing world and actually outside. So I didn't know how to do that when I first became a chief executive,
Yeah.
but that's now different now. So there's lots and lots of people out there who can inspire you and give you a great role model in terms of how I think you could be as a chief exec. Secondly, I think have really find a really strong passion. Really believe in something you're going to be brilliant at.
Yeah.
And that could be anything, couldn't it? Really. And the joy of housing associations is that they're so varied in terms of what we all do, really. But I think sometimes some organisations and some leaders sort of lack a sense of what they really care about. What are you going to go to the wall over, basically?
Yeah.
What is the thing that's going to define you as a leader and your organisation? So I'd urge people to find that, really, and the way you find that really is through discussion and conversation. You find out what people around you care about, your customers and your employees, really. I think thirdly, I'd say find out what I found out, which is basically that if you're going to be successful, it's not just about you. You've got to be good at building teams, really, and that is not always easy at all. Um, but for me, the value of having a diverse team, people who think differently, I've really, really sort of benefited from over the years. So I didn't used to like sort of conflict and people disagreeing with me in the early days. But I've come to recognise how important it is to have diversity of thinking across your organisation and teams, no matter how uncomfortable that can be. The final thing I'd say really is don't be afraid to say sorry and apologise to people. I honestly, I do it almost daily because I mess, you mess up basically. You cannot be perfect. Again, I used to think that being a leader is about being perfect and getting everything right. It's just not really. That's not what leadership's about, really. Leadership's about you sometimes just mucky and just doesn't work really, does it really? And you get things wrong, you have bad days and good days and that sort of stuff, really. So yeah, so I'd sort of say, use those basic human qualities of humility to sort of recognize the fact that actually as a leader, you're not perfect really. And so final thing I'd add really, which is the thing that I've really drawn upon over the years, and I think in some ways relates to the sort of stuff I'm doing in my own personal life, is really about resilience, really. I had this interesting conversation with one of my board members the other day about can you actually learn resilience? And I was saying, I'm not sure you can, but you can certainly learn techniques which help, really.
Yeah.
I think resilience for leaders these days and that ability to dust yourself off and keep going, particularly in a sector at the moment which feels particularly fragile, I'd say, because it feels like, I don't know, it just feels like that bad things can happen to you, not necessarily for your own fault or reason really at the moment. So there's a lot of in some cases, valid criticism of people in the sector, but in some cases, not so valid criticism, actually. But you've got to have the ability to sort of bounce back from that and to hold on things that matter to you most, really.
Yeah, and one thing I've observed, I spoke on a podcast a couple of weeks back, Yorkshire Housing's podcast, and one thing that I've absorbed in the last maybe 6 months is a lot of chief executives have decided this is their time to retire. And I think more than I usually have seen across the sector, because I think they've got us through, in some cases, and I don't know about your particular reason, but they've got us through the pandemic, they've got us to this point, and there's a new wave of challenges now coming, and it feels like a really natural break in play almost, to say, now it's time for new leadership and someone to take it onto the next level. What's steered your decision, firstly, but then secondly, how do you think we're going to be able to combat all of the challenges that we have, given that we've had a rent cap of 7% and we've had a few things that are going to, tie our arms behind our back in the future to be able to deal with all those things? Big question, but
yeah, no, it is. I mean, first of all, from my point of view, I'm always saying to people, I'm just not retiring. I'll never retire because I'm just not that sort of person, really. I'm just the idea of retirement is just not my psyche at all.
Yeah.
But I basically gave my board a year's notice of stepping down.
Fine.
And in some ways it's the hardest decision of my life, James, but equally the easiest one, really, because I do think that as a leader, you need to know what's the right time to move on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was running out of ideas. I still think I make a big difference there. But what I did recognise was that in essence, I want to do something different now. I want to work with other organisations in a different capacity. So I'm lucky enough to be on the board of two other housing associations, two wonderful housing associations, and also just joined the board of a commercial technology company as well. And I'm just loving that experience of sitting on the side of the table, really.
Yeah.
I think I can use the skills and qualities I've got to really help get the best out of executives, really. Because I think, having been one for a long time, you really understand what helps and what doesn't help, really. So I'm going to do that personally. So I'm certainly not leaving the sector. I'm going to be around for a long time still, I hope. In terms of your question about what was the second question? Sorry,
it was just around kind of like we're facing some serious challenges, and we've not got the money to. I don't believe we've got the money in the sector at the moment to deal with all of them. But how do we try and deal with decarbonisation, new build housing, the housing shortage, to name a few, damp and mould, decent homes 2's being muted. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of noise. But how do we cut through that noise and try and solve some of these problems with our budgetary constraints that we all have?
Yeah, it's certainly a great question, James. And I'm not sure I'm going to answer this question really, but what I would say, and I'm saying this from experience of being a board member at other organisations and also at RHP, is that I think that the role of leaders in the future is going to be about trying to sort of quieten down the complexity, really. Yeah. It is too complex, it's too difficult. There are too many things moving around at the moment. A lot of that is not our fault. It's because of what the changes taking place in the operating environment, what's happened in the last 3 years, all the rest of it, really. But what we can take control of is what we focus upon, what matters to us most as organisations. And I just think we are sort of creating a sort of myriad of strategies and policies and procedures and reports to boards and goodness knows what, really. And it's too much. We need to come back to the simplicity of saying, what are we really about? What are we going to focus upon? How am I going to spend my time as a leader? I'm going to spend my time servicing boards and committees and writing reports, or am I really going to run this business in the way in which I need to? The second thing for me, and again, it's this mantra which I'm talking about, is that I do fundamentally think, and again, I recognise not everybody agrees with me, but I fundamentally believe that we are expensive as a sector. I think we are spending too much money delivering in many cases, reasonably basic services, really. And there's this point about, how do we sort of manage transactional services, really? If you carry on doing that through call centers and through,
Yeah, I agree.
teams of human beings, it's going to cost you a lot of money, which is what it does cost us, and it will create complexity in your business, which we'll never get away from in terms of the sort of problems and issues it causes for customers, really. So moving to a situation where we start to automate all the things we can automate and give people the opportunity to self-serve is key. And the reason that's so key for the future is because it frees up our time then to do the more complex stuff. And that's what we need to do. If you try to do everything,
well, that's the problem.
It just doesn't work, really. So I just think that's really key. And the third thing, which is linked to that point, is that we have to use technology in homes in the future. Now, this is not new because people have been talking about this for a long time. But the answer to all the sort of issues we face in people's homes really is connected technology, really. So using sensor technology in people's homes to warn you about problems and breakdowns before they happen, so you can move away from reactive repairs to more planned maintenance programs. Use sensor technology to warn you around compliance type issues, so when different things are happening in people's homes, but also to provide better quality of life for our customers, really. So I think for me, it's that thing about simplicity and use of technology to give us better tools.
Totally agree. I've got a guy from Octopus Energy coming on to our podcast next week, and their product is zero bills, which will come to the market, which will solve the cost of living crisis. Not solve it entirely, but it will really help customers not have to worry about electricity spiking and all that sort of thing. And I think we've got to start finding a way to combine all of these technologies, because they're out there already in their own single format into our homes to give us them early warning signs of what's going to go wrong in a property. And that's been available to us for 5 or 6 years in some cases.
Has been. I mean, so I love the sort of big, bold thinking, if you like, the guy from the Octopus sort of background. I mean, to me, that's the sort of thinking we now need.
Yeah.
Because I do feel that you're right. I think the technology is there. The thing about technology in things like smart homes, it's becoming cheaper and it's becoming much more available. And that's going to accelerate. That is going to accelerate. And that's what we've really got to, I think, make the most of going forward.
No, I agree. And as we wrap up, I think we could do 5 episodes here. But as we wrap up, I've got a couple of things that I wanted to ask you. So, firstly, you've answered one of these, but what does the future of RHP look like now? So, what would you love to see looking back in 5 years, and what's going to happen with the leadership? Because that'd be good to know.
Yeah. Well, the thing I love about RHP, James, is that it's just, it's your ideal size for the organisation, because it's big enough to have resources to do stuff.
Yeah.
But it's small enough to be agile and quick on its feet, really. And their qualities have served us really well over the last few years in particular. So I'm really proud about, how we've come through what has been a pretty challenging period for lots of people. And I think sort of maintaining that sort of agility going forward is a really important part of RHP. So what I hope is that Sarah, who's my successor, will continue that sort of going forward, really, because I think it'll really help her and the organisation to be even more successful. I think secondly, I think another quality around RHP, which I think which I also really like, is the fact that we never ever stand still. So we talked about all the wonderful awards we've won over the years, and they have been great. I can promise you, the following day we walked in the office after winning some fantastic awards. Well, what do we do next? And how can we top that? How can we do better than that? And that sort of sense of change and reinvention, we need now more than ever before. So that thing about never standing still, never thinking, "Oh, we're amazing, that's it now." We've never felt like that, and I really, really like that. I think the third thing I'd say, which I know will continue, is our sort of total passion for customers and service. We really, really do mean it about trying to be a great service provider. We're not there yet. I know, there's aspects of our service which just don't work at the moment. We know that, but we are never going to give up on that sort of goal of topping that UK customer service index and knocking off, pets at home off the top pedestal. One day you'll see RHP there, really.
Yeah.
And I think, again, without repeating the same old stuff around technology, I want us to be a sector leader around technology.
Yeah.
So I want us to be this sort of organisation which basically tries stuff out and then shares our learning with other people.
Perfect.
So again, one of the things I've learned over the years is that I used to think it was all about, you've got to protect what you know and the people might steal your ideas. It's all nonsense, honestly, because the best way is to find like-minded organizations and just share learning and knowledge and skills openly with those people. Because it's amazing what good stuff comes back to you, actually.
Yeah.
So my advice to Sarah, who's my successor, and I know Sarah really well because we've climbed Kilimanjaro together. We've seen the best side of each other and the worst sides of each other, I think, really. And is that my advice to her is really continue that sort of passion behind RHP, but do it in modern new ways, really. So I know she's going to be amazing because she's brilliant, and I can't wait to see what she'll do, basically.
No, amazing. And the final thing, and I mean, we're talking blue sky thinking here, like slightly, but like if you look back in 10 years, or we look forward 10 years, should I say, what would you love to see in the sector? What would be the final statement from you in terms of what you would love to see happen in the sector? And I know you've talked about a lot of this now, but what would be the massive overarching statement of something you'd love to see in our sector?
I just want people to talk about housing associations in a much, much more positive way. We do amazing stuff with amazing people. We get terrible press for it, sometimes because of our own fault and stuff. But I want people to talk about us as being these extraordinary organisations which are providing amazing homes for people and great service, and that's what I'd love, really, because we absolutely deserve that. And I know we can do it.
Yeah, I agree. And what a lovely way to finish. I mean, you've been an exceptional guest. I mean, honestly, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. But I just want to say, I mean, what an unbelievable career you've had at RHP. What a great time for me to have the privilege of having you on the show at this point in your career. And I wish you all the success in your non-executive roles and your other things that you do in our sector. And I'm sure everyone will be the same, but what an unbelievable career you've had.
I tell you what, James, I've also promised my staff that I'm going to fly the RHP flag at the top of Everest one day. So watch this space. So maybe I'll get a photograph of the front page of Inside Housing with me sort of
love that. I'm going to hold you to that. I will be checking in 2 years time.
Who knows?
Just as a final thing, if someone does want to reach out to you for any advice, where's the best place? Can they add you on LinkedIn? Can they send you a message on LinkedIn? Would that
absolutely. Yeah, LinkedIn or I'll send you my contact details, James. Basically, so please share it anybody. But LinkedIn, absolutely. You can contact to our work website, so easy to get hold of me. So basically, I'd love to talk to anybody who's sort of like-minded and wants to do sort of similar type of stuff as us, really.
Amazing. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, James. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Hip. If you'd like to hear more from us, please be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. We are also running a 30-minute clinic free of charge to any clients that want to recruit in a more inclusive way. For more information, please reach out to us on our website, andersonjames.com.